Hi guys, welcome back. This time around, I'm bringing you the latest from Kiwi ears, the Cadenza 2. This is a follow-up to the original Cadenza, as the name implies, which was, if I'm not mistaken, actually the first IEM from Kiwi ears. The original Cadenza used a beryllium-coated driver, which is I've got it over there, but I'll run by you guys in a second. This latest Cadenza, or this updated Cadenza, or this new Cadenza, whichever way you want to call it, uses a titanium driver, and it also employs the latest version of the CARS system from Kiwi ears. And what is the CARS system? The CARS system is Kiwi ears adaptive resonance system. It's a system that they first used in the collaboration with Clinical, the Singolo, which I also have over here. And basically what they are doing is something that we also saw IVipQ do before. Well, actually I think IVipQ was the first one to have done it, which is basically they are using a helmet resonator in effect to create an emphasis on a specific point of the frequency range, in this case in that area there around 200 hertz. So the transition into, let's say, the mid bass, from the sub bass into the mid bass, and they are doing this in an attempt to, well, clean up bass reproduction to start with, and give it a little bit more sub bass focus without still losing any of the impact necessary, and then again also helping out, just making the mids and the upper mids a little bit more engaging, a little bit more organic, a little bit more detailed. Obviously all of these systems are always very interesting. They're always very, let's say, interesting. I guess that's the best way to use it. But of course, they are going to be dependent on a number of other factors. In the case of the Singolo, for example, they used an LCP driver. And an LCP driver does have certain characteristics with regards to its higher frequency reproduction, which maybe in the case of the Singolo, although it was an interesting IEM, I didn't particularly find that it extracted the best not only of the driver but also of what they were attempting to do by using this tuning system. Perhaps if they had used a different driver, who knows, like it could have worked out better. Coupled to that, the Singolo was a little bit not overpriced, but it was priced at a value which made it compete up against some serious other options. And that ultimately, I think, was the difficulty that the Singolo encountered. You can now actually pick it up for $30. So at $30, I have to say it is pretty impressive value. But anyway, what do I have here from Kiwi ears? I've got here obviously the Cadenza, I've got the Dolce, I've got the Bell, I've got the Singolo, and I've got the Cadenza 2. Cadenza beryllium driver, that Dolce used an LCP driver, the Bell used a DLC, or uses a DLC. The Singolo, again an LCP driver, and the Cadenza 2 a titanium driver. We have a mix here of either full resin in these two, or then a plastic shell, or then a mix of resin plastic with a metal faceplate. And this one is what seems to be, I mean, it seems to be a full metal shell. Yeah, full metal shell or resin with a metal faceplate. I can't really tell. Anyway, that's not really the important. What is important, it's got a solid build. It's got this new kind of design we've been seeing now on Kiwi ears applied to their faceplate, which makes it kind of easy to identify the product. You can straight away tell by the look of it, which is very consistent across the board, that this is probably a Kiwi ears product. Anyway, in terms of the build qualities, like I was saying, spot on. The cable, I mean, it's not a bad cable. We've seen this cable being used by them before. Exchangeable termination would have been nice, but then again, not really a necessity. After all, we are talking about $50, so you know, we can't expect the world. The tips that it brings are pretty decent, and that's it. You know, there's really not much more that can be said. Let's say the money was spent where I think matters, which is actually on the IEM. As for sound, what can we say about the Cadenza's 2 sound? Well, using this titanium driver, as I was mentioning, or this titanium coated driver, does of course imply that there are certain aspects of the sound that, straight away we don't have to worry about, because the titanium, excuse me, the titanium driver does allow for a certain peculiar style of cleanliness in the sound, which is very much welcomed. And those characteristics basically are the fact that titanium coated drivers can be really clean up top, conferring a lot of detail, a lot of micro details, making let's say the sound highly detailed, if that is what you pretend, or if that is what you like. But it also means that when we are tuning, that we should pay particular attention to not, let's say, bring out too much of that innate characteristic. And so it is wise, when we are using titanium drivers, as is any other driver which has a tendency of being a little bit more on the brighter side, beryllium coated drivers are another example, that we do a tuning that explores those characteristics of the extra detail that the driver can provide, but doesn't take it to the point where we start now having a driver which has got a sibilant sound, or is manifesting the less desirable effects of it. And when it comes here to the Cadenza 2, I think Kiwi has nailed it pretty well. It is an IEM which is, I would say, mid-focused. The mids are kind of the star of the show. They are where the sound has been emphasized and tuned in a little bit more, let's say, emphasized manner. Although there is, having said that, a nice amount of bass and sub-bass. There are occasions, yes, that I would have liked a little bit more slam. I won't deny it, especially if you go back and forth between it and the original Cadenza, which also uses a driver which has a tendency of being on the brighter side. You can easily pick up on that extra bass energy that the original Cadenza has. It's not by any means a deal breaker or anything of the sort. I'm just saying that, yes, the focus here on the Cadenza 2 is mids, it's vocals, and the bass that is here and the highs that are here are both adequate and complement that mid-focused sound that it offers. The highs, although again, as I mentioned, it is a titanium driver, they've been able to control them really well, and so we don't get none of that harshness that sometimes we find in titanium diaphragm drivers, or that we used to find in the past when those drivers initially came out and were not maybe tuned to the best to the best standards of obtaining that balance and that coherence of sound. Mids, as I mentioned, and as I've said already at the start of the show, it's clean, they're detailed. Male and female vocals come across in a very organic, very realistic manner, with enough weight from the bass to make them realistic, full, very musical. The mids definitely on the Cadenza 2 are highly musical, while on some of the other IEMs here, and I'll get to that in a second, you'll find that sometimes those mids are engaging, but maybe they are just a little bit overemphasized, or then they're a little bit muffled by the excessive bass that you might have. They lose a little bit of that ability to be, let's say, audiophile. In the Cadenza 2, they've aimed at giving us an audiophile quality mid-range, and it's been perfectly obtained, in my opinion. As for the highs, clean, detailed, great soundstage, great imaging, great detailed retrieval. I think soundstage, detailed retrieval are probably the two better characteristics in terms of the technicalities of the Cadenza 2. Timbre and tonality is correct, I'm not going to deny it, but I feel that this time around in the Cadenza 2, it is the soundstage and the technicalities that take the win. And that's basically it, guys. I mean, that's in a nutshell what I can say about the QE 2. It's a nicely built IEM entering a market which has got a lot of very solid other IEMs at the $50 price point, and I've got a few here just to give them a little quick overview. It's using that interesting solution that QE has used before, and this time updated, and in this time, in my opinion as well, better implemented, because they've chosen a different driver type. And as I mentioned, that tuning system tries to make things in that 200, just over 200 hertz area become a little bit more polished, a little bit more detailed, so as to clean up the bass, make it a little bit more sub-bass focused, and not let it drag into the mids. And you know, it's very much noticeable. While on the, as I mentioned, while on the Singolo, you do also pick up on this detail, on this let's say this attempt at cleaning up everything. The fact that it's an LCP driver, it has a tendency of being slightly darker, and so the mids and the high and the upper mids, they although clean, they just lack that little extra amount of energy. And the Cadenza 2, this titanium driver that they used, this was the perfect choice. I think really brought out the best. If they had tried to give a little bit more energy of the bass, I guess it could be doable. I guess they could have tried to give it maybe who knows, maybe by adding a little switch here to just give it an extra 2 dBs of boost. It could have been done. I'm not going to deny it. But I don't think that was the attempt. I think the attempt here was to create a very coherently sounding IEM, single DD IEM, priced at this $50 price point, where mids are very well executed, and so focused at a crowd that wants an audiophile experience, or wants above all an audiophile experience, without losing any of the let's say desired musicality as well, and good level of technicalities. Definitely the QEs is more on the musical side of things, as opposed to some other IEMs that we find at this point that are going to maybe be a little bit more clinical. As compared to, you know, just very briefly with the other IEMs from QEs or the other single DDs, well, compared to the original Cadenza, I mean, the Cadenza is still a phenomenal IEM, even by today's standards, and even compared here with its latest sibling. I think the biggest difference that you'll notice between the two of them is that the treble here on the Cadenza 2 is just that little extra more polished. And yes, you do notice a little bit more bass energy, but for the majority of the songs, I don't really think it's the bass that you can notice. There's a little bit more of it, without a doubt, but it's not the quality that there really isn't much difference in terms of the quality. It's more the quantity that differentiates the two of them, but it's in the highs. It's in how much more polished the Cadenza 2 has become in the upper mids and highs that I think is the biggest step up in performance. Compared to the Dolce, it's a completely different sounding IEM. The Dolce is fun, engaging, loads of bass, very much V-shaped, nice IEM for what it was intended to be. So I don't even think it's a comparison. I mean, these are two totally different animals. Compared to the Bell, I have to say that you know, the Bell is a really good IEM. As I said, it's kind of a marriage between what the original Cadenza had of positive and what the Dolce had of positive, and they've married it together and given us the Bell. Just trying to find the graph. I think it's number 13. Yeah, exactly. And what that means is, when I compare it to the Cadenza 2, yes, definitely the Bell has got a whole bunch more bass quantity without question. Maybe not as detailed, but I think it's not the fault of the driver, but it's more the fact that they've wanted to emphasize the mid bass impact here on the Bell. But in terms of the mids, and the fact that using a DLC driver also allows them to get away with a little bit of that extra energy in the bass frequencies, because DLC drivers have a tendency of, you know, cleaning up sound quite well and handling quite a big bass tune to them. So the Bell is pretty decent. Don't in any way disregard the Bell. As compared to the Singolo, which used basically the same system, the car system. Look, as I mentioned, at $30, yes, definitely the Singolo is an interesting purchase. It sounds well, you know, sounds great. Nothing to be said there. When you compare it outright in terms of price, of performance to what the Cadenza 2 offers, the Cadenza 2 is definitely an improvement. So overall, I think the takeaway that we can get here is the Cadenza 2 is a solid single DD IEM from QEs. It's, I think, learned from the previous IEMs and taken away what it should take away from them, without then, you know, bringing into the equation any negativity that those drivers or that this particular setup could have. So well done. Without a question, I think it's a solid IEM. I brought out 4 other IEMs in the single DD price point, which I think also pretty interesting. Let me just make a little bit of space here. What are those other 4 IEMs? I've got here the Guangzhou, the Venture Guangzhou. I've got here the nice HCK, the Tears. I've got here the KB Ear Tourbillon, the TB Pro. And I've got here the KZ Phantom. So an interesting selection. All of these IEMs roughly are priced at the same price point as the Cadenza 2. That's roughly $60 for the Venture Electronics. This is about $35, a little bit cheaper. This is about $40 for the Phantom, and it's about $50 on Ali. Just over $50 for the TB Pro, on around $60. Sorry, for the TB Pro on AliExpress. It's about $100 on Keep Hi-Fi. So if you take the Keep Hi-Fi price, then yes, it's not a fair comparison. It's significantly more expensive. But if the fact you can pick it up on AliExpress for about the $60 price point, I think it's made sense to compare it or have it here with the Cadenza 2. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, this is very much mid-focused. That's the start of the show, and each one of these other IEMs here also has certain characteristics. So this is not so much, oh, this is better, this is worse, but these are other very solid IEMs at this, let's say, under $50 price point. If I have to say which is the one that stands out the most for me, is the Venture Electronics, the Guangxi, without question. It is a phenomenal IEM, phenomenal. It really deserves all the attention that it's been getting, and it's seriously very, very solid IEM. The others here have got interesting characteristics as well. The Phantom, I think, has just taken the formula of the Zenith, give it just a smidge more bass and tighten up the upper mids to treble, and it sounds really good. It sounds really, really good, and those switches make it extremely versatile as well in what it can do. The nice HKD tiers, I've got it here with this non-stock cable, but with the DSP cable, the fact that you have that DSP and it works really well, that DSP, makes the tiers something that's special because of that. In the normal, let's say, connection like I have here, it's got a sound which is very much kind of on the same vibe as the Cadenza 2. They've used a titanium driver. They've purposely not overtuned the mids, upper mids, and treble, so that the sound can come out in a more balanced manner. You don't get any of the shoutiness. I've even heard some people say that they found it to be dark. I don't particularly agree with that. I don't think the Tiers is anything but dark, or even remotely close to being dark. When I show you the graphs, you'll see what I mean. Sounds phenomenal IEM. It sounds really, really good. I mean, very, very good IEM. And the Tourbillon, perhaps the one that's got the most different tuning here compared to the Cadenza 2. But again, a solid IEM, very well built, nice driver that they're using. It sounds phenomenal. It's an incredible, incredible IEM. And at that 50 odd price point that you can pick it up as well, it's a serious contender. Like I said, this is not so much to, this one is the Cadenza 2 is better or worse. They all have their characteristics, but if I have to say which is the one that stands out of all of these IEMs, I've mentioned that it's the Venture Electronics, and I'm not taking anything away from any one of the others, mind you. That's the one that stands out. And when I take the Venture Electronics and I compare it here to the QEs, it's the QEs has its time where it can give a run for its money to the makes sense, but I don't think that the QEs is a better IEM than the Venture Electronics. I'll be honest with you, I think they very much trade blows. While, for example, in the case of the Tiers, yes, I would argue that purely on the cable setup, this here is probably a little bit more polished than the Tiers, but again, it's going to be very much dependent on how the IEM sits in your ears. But I have to give the bass of the Tiers just that little extra amount of energy that sometimes I would like the Cadenza 2 to have. So, again, not an outright lose or win. With the Tourbillon, it has a very nice mid-bass presentation. It confers a very nice organic sound, and if that is what you're looking for, more organic sound, then definitely this is the one to go. The Phantom just surprised me by, like I said, taking the formula of the Zenith and just improving upon it. When I compare the Phantom with the QEs, the sensation that I get is the QEs is that It's not in the bass that it outdoes the Phantom, not in the mids as well, but it's in the cleanliness of the upper mids to the treble, where the Cadenza, does take the cake over the KZ, the Phantom. But again, let me make this perfectly clear. These are not outright massacres or beating or no, they very much are trading blows here constantly. And it's like I said, the Kiwi Ears 2 is the Cadenza 2, my apologies, is just another very solid IEM at the single DD price point of around $50-$60, and one that I would say, yes, compared to the previous products from Cadenza, oh my god, from Kiwi Ears, definitely a solid IEM as compared to its, let's say, rivals, or some of its rivals. It's got its work cut out. So I would suggest, if you guys have the ability, go out and listen to some IEMs. Listen to them. Don't just take my word for it. Listen to them. Put them in your ears. See how they fit. But one thing is guaranteed: the Cadenza 2 will not disappoint. If what you want is an audiophile type of sound, that is clean, that details are there, that the mids, the vocals, that sense of musicality and realism is what you are wanting, the Cadenza 2 has hit the nail right on the head, full on. Okay, let me just quickly show another graphs and we'll wrap this up. Okay, so let's talk now Kiwi Ears Cadenza 2 graphs. So this is the graph with the, let's say, narrow bore tips that it has, where you can see what I was talking about. So that's got that helmets resonator, that car system, version 2 system, helping to make sure that the bass is tucked in at 200 hertz. It's got a slight little bump there. I've seen some graphs where this bump is a little bit more increased, and this bump here is to try and give back a little bit more impact in the mid bass, but in my particular unit, I mean, it's very mild. Okay, that 100 hertz point there corresponds to about 1.7 kilohertz, but the amount of sub bass energy that's been tuned into it, matches up nicely with there, and ultimately the sound it's a clean, detailed bass sound that only felt a little bit thin sometimes, in that 100 to 250 hertz area. I mean, and like I said, not a deal breaker. With the wide bore tips, which is what I liked the most, this is the graph that I got, and this is the graph that I'm going to be using from now on. So this was the tuning that I got. Sounds, as I said, phenomenal, very much mid focused. The vocals, incredible, male, female vocals, very realistic, very musical. Okay, now throwing in some of the other IEMs here, and let's start with the Cadenza, original Cadenza. So the original Cadenza, that's the graph of the Cadenza, similar-ish up top. Okay, not a big difference. I actually have, let me see if I can find the Cadenza with the wide bore tip, because the Cadenza with the wide bore tip is basically the same thing, because this is with the narrow bore tip. My apologies. So Kiwi Ears, my apologies guys, I should have actually put it here. Kiwi Ears, come on. Okay, Kiwi Ears Cadenza, wide bore. There we go. Okay, there we go. So let's take away the other Cadenza. Okay. No, sorry. I'm putting the Cadenza 2. Sorry, guys. This is what happens when you try to rush things. This one, yeah. There we go. That's the Kiwi Ears, the original Kiwi Ears with the wide bore tip on it. And as you can see, the similarity of the tuning is very much there. Let me put it in black. Okay, the similarity in tuning is very much there. A little bit more energy here in this 100 to 250 hertz point. A little bit extra energy over there as well. That 100 hertz point corresponds to 2 kilohertz. Balanced. It sounds phenomenal, the Cadenza. Sounds phenomenal. What the difference that you can hear, and you don't see it in the graph doesn't tell you this, the difference that you will notice when you're hearing to one and the other is that the Kiwi Ears, the Cadenza 2 is more elegant, more polished, more refined in its upper mids and treble presentation. That's the biggest difference that you'll find. Not a huge difference in the bass, to be totally honest. The quality is basically the same, a little bit more quantity on the original Cadenza, okay? But it's up here where you see the differences. So that's the Cadenza with the Cadenza 2. Let's take the Cadenza out. We don't need it. And now compared with the, like I said, I've got here the Dolce as well, so the Cadenza, the Dolce, two totally different sounding IEMs. I mean, it's evident. Compared with the with the Singolo, yes, this is the one that also you guys will want to know or want to see. Again, if you guys notice, and let me just take away here quickly, it's got that little bump there again. It's got that tuck in at 200 hertz, and then, you know, I think the issue here, well, not the issue, the way that the tuning is done per se. When you look at it, it's great. It's, you know, well done. When you go back and forth between the two of them, there's a lot of similarities in the sound. The difference is the fact that one uses a titanium diaphragm, the other one uses an LCP diaphragm. It makes the sound of the Singolo be maybe overly warm by comparison, okay, due to the driver's tendency of being a warmer sounding driver. On the other hand, the Cadenza 2, it's got more detail. It's just got more detail. Yes, you could argue that, okay, the 100 hertz point here corresponds to 2 point something kilohertz on the upper mids area, so the energy that's in one side versus the other, and that compared to the Cadenza 2 is not exactly the same. That also is an explanation for the shift of the sound to be slightly warmer. And you know, if, like I said, you could go down that road. You could definitely, and for the $30 that the Singolo costs, definitely it's an interesting buy if you prefer an even more warmer sounding IEM. Or rather, not even a more warmer sounding IEM. If you prefer a more warmer sounding IEM versus a more open, at times, I would even say that it would be safe to call the Cadenza 2 a neutralish, bright type of tuning. It's kind of got a very neutral tuning. It's slightly bright at times, but very, very, very well done. That's the reality. So, Cadenza 2 in red versus the Singolo. Okay, both using that car system, blah, 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 like I mentioned. We've seen, we haven't seen, we need the bell. And here is the bell. And again, you know, although the graph doesn't look the same, and yes, when you listen to it, you notice that the bell's got a hell of a lot more mid-bass impact, you'd be surprised how actually similarish they end up sounding. They sound actually way more similar than what the graph would lead you to believe. That's those ones there out of the way. Now, compared to just very briefly the graphs of the other IEMs that I selected here, compared with the, where is it? Compared to the Phantom, this is the graph of the Phantom. They look almost identical, but again, different driver materials, different overall sound. Bass, mids, very similar on both of them. Then up top, the Cadenza 2 has just got more detail. It just is more, it's cleaner. It's just more, that's it. It's cleaner. So it's a more open sounding IEM compared with the Nice HK, the Tears. Both are using those titanium diaphragms, and the difference is again very minimal, a little bit more mid-bass energy on the side of the Tears, but up top they sound very, very similar. Maybe just a smidge, a little bit more detail on the side of the Cadenza 2, but it's down to it maybe having less bass energy than necessarily it being tuned with more to give. Compared with the, I forgot to put here the KB here, the Tourbillon. My apologies, guys. KB here we go. The Tourbillon. Nicely tuned IEM, as I mentioned. But when going back and forth here with the, let me just take away here the Tears. When going back and forth here with the Cadenza 2, you notice that it's got more mid-bass. But again, I wouldn't say it is as emphasized as what the graph is showing. It's got more mid-bass, more impact, warmer sounding definitely, but not as emphasized as what you would think, or you would be led to believe. And then finally, compared with the Venturetronics UA Guangxi, my apologies, this one here. Okay, let me just change the color of it. Let me make it blue so there's a big difference. There we go. Compared with the Guangxi, very similar, the tuning, very, very, very similar, as you guys can see. You notice there's more mid-bass impact, definitely, but they are very similar. I mean, I would say that sometimes, yes, the Cadenza 2 does with one or two songs just give an extra little bit more, like Up and Up from Jeff Ryan, maybe sounds a little bit more detailed in the Cadenza 2, but on the Guangxi it's got the ability to scale higher. So you know, it's like I mentioned earlier, very, very similar in terms of their overall performance, with just very slight nuances making the sound bend towards one way or the other. A hard choice. I would say just listen to it, listen to both if you have an opportunity, and then decide. One thing is definitely for sure, the Guangxi is one of the best IEMs at its price point, and even IEMs higher than that. And the Cadenza 2 definitely has made, or has done enough to deserve also being one of the more solid options. Okay, guys, as always, like and subscribe. Any questions you might have, please feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer. You take care now. Bye-bye.